Hey, it's Monday. I'm Jarrah Stays coming to you from the beautiful North End neighborhood of Detroit, and we have a great show for you today. First, a former cop has gotten into the cannabis business in a big way. John McCleod, co-founder of Cloud Cannabis, joins me for a conversation. Then, 3 things to know around town. And yes, I'm aware that a 12-day extension was announced today to the statewide pause to try to slow the coronavirus. Dr. Paul Thomas will join me tomorrow so we can unpack it all with some perspective and expertise. For now, welcome to your Daily Detroit for December 7th. Let's get started. Joining virtually is John McCleod. He's a co-founder of Cloud Cannabis. First off, welcome to Daily Detroit. And second, thanks for the pun.
You're welcome. Jared, thank you for having me as a native Detroiter. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Well, I got to ask you. So I'm looking into this thing, and you're a former Detroit cop that now is in the cannabis business. That's a jump. How did we get here?
Yeah, well, listen, it's not as big of a jump as people think. I'm a born and raised in Detroit, lifelong Detroiter, and my goal always was to be a Detroit police officer. And I was fortunate enough to reach that position, loved my job, and unfortunately, I was injured in the performance of my duties, so I had to find a second career. And after dabbling in a few things, cannabis came about, and here we are talking today.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's something that whenever anybody makes a transition like that, I feel like there's usually a story behind like how they discovered that cannabis was something that would be valuable to them and then kind of shares it on. I know you got an education component. How did you discover it for yourself?
My story is, it's not that unique, but it's unique for a lot of people to hear. So when I was injured on the police department, I ended up in a very familiar path that a lot of people go into, and it's the path towards opiates for pain management. And I was very reluctant to take a pharmaceutical medication, but particularly opiates, because I had heard such negative things about them. After really trying a handful of other remedies, I finally relented, gave opiates a try. And, after a short period of time, my wife sat me down and fortunately had a very honest conversation with me and just told me it wasn't working. I was not being the best husband I could be. I wasn't being the best father I could be. I just wasn't being the best human I could be, quite frankly speaking. So, we had to find another path. So I have a good friend of mine who has been a doctor in the medical cannabis industry since 2010. He's really on the forefront of the industry, just an incredible guy, an amazing healer. And he was ready for me to come along and see him. So after some consultation with him, he gave me a recommendation for medical cannabis. And Jerry, it was, when I tried it the first time, it was simply like flipping a switch. I mean, it was unbelievable how quickly I was able to heal myself naturally without the negative side effects that I was receiving from the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, opioids have just wreaked havoc on our country on so many levels, and it's something that we just don't talk enough about. What was the big difference for you? Because you had this frontline experience and lived through it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say the thing that was, when I look back at it, the scariest piece of the opiate portion of my life is that I was unaware of all of these negative changes that were happening. I was unaware of all this negative just energy I was putting out into the world. And that for me really kind of is the scary portion, because without having that conversation or that honest moment with my wife, I don't know where I would be right now. And it's not putting lights to it that I believe that cannabis saved my life, because I believe it did. I certainly attribute it to allowing me to be the best person I can be.
So how do you pivot from that to getting into the business side? Because looking at Cloud Cannabis, doing some background research, you all are pretty ambitious with what you're doing, and it seems like you found some success so far.
When we started this, and I say we, because this was really started with a group of friends of mine who saw a path to an industry that was really underserved, and it's kind of based off an education piece. So when you receive a recommendation from a medical doctor in the state of Michigan for your medical marijuana card, there's a big hole in the market between getting that recommendation, or now that we're in an adult use market, deciding to try cannabis potentially for the first time and actually understanding what the right products are for you to use. It can be quite overwhelming going into one of these stores for someone who's not knowledgeable in the cannabis space. And that's right where I found myself after seeing the doctor. Is I walked into a store and I was overwhelmed. It was almost too much for me to really take on. And I fortunately had a good bud tender my first experience and was able to navigate it properly. But for us, we really wanted to fill a hole in the industry, which is really a teacher's kind of a role with explaining the products, explaining the proper dosage so that people can use cannabis, whether to treat a medical ailment or to improve energy or focus, but in order for them to live the highest version of themselves.
Well, that information I think is key because I've known a lot of people over the years who deal with anxiety or a number of other issues, whether it's something mental or something physical. They want to get into these things, but they kind of go online and it's kind of just like, who do you trust? It turns into kind of a black hole, a gap of knowledge. And then what happens is that folks either try things and it goes off the rails, or they get into that indecision thing where they could really improve their lives, improve their relationships if they knew how to do things, but there's still so many gaps in knowledge there.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I hear the story quite often from people that, their aunts gave them a brownie or their cousin gave them a cookie one time at a holiday party. And it kind of led them down the path of a bad experience because they just had too high of a dosage. So it's very important that that first experience is a proper experience. And the education piece is huge because people need to understand what they're consuming. There's a lot of different products, there's a lot of different dosage levels, and there's a lot of different ways to consume cannabis. So it's really at that moment when you go to a store, particularly a Cloud Cannabis store, where that is the most important moment that you're going to have as a consumer of cannabis, is really understanding the assortment of products, what works best for you, and how you need to get to where you're trying to get through cannabis.
Man, that story is so true. I mean, there are multiple people in my life over the years that I know where it's, my brother or my sister pranked me with something, or you know what I mean? There's all these things that give people this like shock reaction in the first part. It's not a healthy thing, especially because we understand so much more around this. So if somebody wants to kind of reset their views with these things or learn more, what are the things that you want to look for in a bud tender or a provider or that kind of education piece? What do they want to look for? What do they want to go for?
Well, they want to look for someone who's committed to their needs first and foremost, someone who's going to listen to them, but someone who's really going to explain the options. Because ultimately, even in a medical market that we've been in since 2008, there's a little, maybe just shy of 300,000 registered patients in the state of Michigan right now. We're adult use, so there's 6.1, 21 and over customers. But let's talk about the medical patients right now. That's 300,000 people in the state of Michigan that have actually gone to a doctor and received a medical recommendation for their card. There's a lot more people in the state of Michigan that could benefit from cannabis and really would be using it almost as medicine. I mean, what I found out in this industry is no one sleeps. No one in this country apparently sleeps very well.
No.
So a sleep is a common issue that people come in to the stores and they ask, I need help sleeping. Well, that's very simple. You would start off with a very low dose THC gummy that you would take a half an hour to 45 minutes before bedtime. And then you would gauge it as you go on there. And it's about starting off slow and incrementally moving yourself up to where you reach that dosage level that gets you to where you want to be. It's a process that can be daunting at first, but if given the right information, is really simple to begin.
Well, and how important is that individual tailoring? Because, I mean, there are still a lot of things that because of, frankly, federal issues over the years that we're still learning and things like that. So how important is that tailoring to individuals?
I think it's key. And I think it's the difference maker, particularly for a Cloud Cannabis company and other operators in the industry. Our company, really the start of our cannabis progression as a group was basically built off the back of my cannabis progression as an individual. So there's a lot of similarities between those two paths, right? So it's very important. And I know people that are heavy cannabis consumers, smokers, like the old school, smoke a joint.
Mm-hmm.
They could smoke a lot of cannabis throughout the day and be fine. But if they have a very low dose edible or a gummy or something to that effect, it gets them to where a position they're uncomfortable. So every individual person is different. And it's not that if you're very experienced in cannabis, this one piece is going to hit you the certain way. It's everyone's individual. It's individual how you metabolize the cannabis in your body. So it's important to have someone who's holding your hand throughout that process, particularly at the beginning, so that you can get the benefit of the plant.
Right. And maybe somebody a little bit more experienced than your buddy who, used to smoke weed in high school.
Yes, 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 for sure. No question about it. Yeah, and listen, it's a very highly regulated industry. We have testing in place. We have laws in place. I mean, this is potentially more highly regulated than a casino gaming floor. So there's protections that are in place for the consumer, for the first time cannabis curious, that puts them in a level where they're not having their buddy around the corner. They're not using his products. They're not using this guy who they know from high school. This is licensed, tested, regulated products that you're going to know what you're consuming when you purchase it.
So that makes me think about the business end. So let's talk about that a little bit. You've started to roll out across the state. You're from Detroit, but you didn't start in Detroit. For listeners, I mean, I'll kind of skip ahead here for one thing. Detroit has not, and listeners of the show will know, Detroit actually hasn't allowed a variety of marijuana businesses in the city. We actually had Councilman James Tate on the show. I'll link to it, going through that entire process. So we'll kind of skip that a little bit. But why Michigan? Why here? And what's the opportunity to do this in this state?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would, recommend that your listeners, if they haven't already listened to that podcast with Councilman Tate, I think you did an excellent job. And I think he does a really, really good job of explaining not only the license types, but the challenges that come about with the cannabis industry when it comes to certain municipalities. There's a lot of pitfalls that some of these municipalities have dealt with, and Detroit is not new to that. So, our first store is in Muskegon Township. It was more of a timing and a property type of progression for us, but we're open now in Ann Arbor. We're soon to be open in Traverse City. And, we have 10 to 12 stores slated to roll out in the next 12 to 18 months. In addition to that, we have cultivation throughout the state, and we have some processing as well. We have some new brands that we're bringing to market in Michigan as well. So we're well positioned for a whole statewide type of a footprint, but we're Michiganders at heart. We're all Michiganders. We're all born and raised Michiganders. So we're planning to build our roots from Cloud Cannabis Company to go deep into Michigan and not wide out into other states like a lot of other organizations are doing.
So it sounds to me from what you're talking about, cultivation, brands, you've got a level of vertical integration going on.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and in this industry, you almost have to be vertical at this point in time to survive. Just because of the competitive pricing, you got to be able to supply your own stores. So yeah, cultivation and processing are huge pieces to have to go along with the retail.
And you mentioned Ann Arbor and around the state. I understand you do have plans to be in the Metro Detroit area if you can, right?
That's correct. Yep. So we have a couple properties that are already either municipally licensed or state licensed that we're in the process of building out. So we'll have a handful of more shops in Metro Detroit here, in the coming months, and we're really excited. I mean, it's nice to be up in Muskegon Township. It's nice to be in Traverse City. It's nice to be in other places up there, maybe Grand Rapids, so to speak. But nothing beats home, right?
Yeah.
So anything close to home is great. And, being 20 minutes down the road from Ann Arbor and being able to run to the shop real quick, it's definitely a comfort level that you can't get in the rest of the state. So certainly Metro Detroit is going to be a big target for us. And we feel like we're going to do quite well here.
Before I let you go, I want to talk about kind of the community benefits side of things. I think a lot of people look at the cannabis industry and feel like there are ways that, to kind of work together with the community. I know that, frankly, a lot of people that are involved in it, they kind of have a community mindset to begin with. And can you kind of talk about what you're doing with that?
As an industry, we really are focused on giving back. We understand the inequities that are associated with cannabis prohibition and understand that you really have to come at it with the heart of compassion and supporting communities. And we do so through hiring locally and giving back. We do it with organizations such as the Humane Society of Huron Valley that we're partnering with for our Cloud Cares program in December, where we're going to donate a portion of our sales to the Humane Society of Huron Valley. We're also partnered with a women's veterans charity in Muskegon Township. And it's a commitment that we keep re-engaging with other not-for-profits and charities throughout the state, but particularly in the communities we're operating, so that we can give back not only of money, but we also want to give back of time, to a volunteering time with our employees, with our C-level staff, and with us founders.
For sure. And I know that there are a number of our listeners who have absolutely no problem going to Ann Arbor for a variety of things. In fact, often do. Shout out to our Ann Arbor listeners, of which I know you're out there. John, if people want to know more, if they want to figure out where to go, learn more about what you're doing, what can they do?
They can visit us at cloudcannabis.com. There's a lot of information on there about our sites, about our community organization, about our assortment of products, about a personalization. We also have a couple of visual aids to give you an idea of the different strains and different products that are available. And certainly there's a phone number there. And, we want to be, an agent of change. We want to be a helper of the community, and we want to be a resource for all those.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jared. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you.
Here are 3 things to know today. Dozens of armed conspiracy theorists and Trump supporters gathered outside of the Detroit home of Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson over the weekend. Benson, the mother of a 4-year-old, said she and her family were finishing decorating the house when loud chants of "Stop the Steal" and other baseless accusations began. Both Detroit and Michigan State Police now have a detail working to protect the residents. This is one of a number of incidents, including a call for Democratic Detroit State Representative Cynthia Johnson to be lynched and death threats against Republican House Speaker Lee Chatfield. It's important to note that none of the Trump campaign's ongoing challenges to the election have made any real progress in court, including those with Trump-appointed judges. There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. My 2 cents is that the election conspiracy theories and the actions around them aren't about the election itself at this point. The results have been certified and in some cases recounted. Nothing is changing there. But they are a performative litmus test intent on purging the Republican Party of anyone who does not support President Donald Trump, realigning the American system for years to come. And this will have immense state and local impacts as coalitions dissolve and others are created. Although a number of state and federal safety net programs around the pandemic have not been funded or renewed as of this recording, one local one has news. The Water Residential Assistant Program, or WRAP, has been expanded. For those who qualify, it provides up to $1,000 in help around water bills. It can help pay current and past due bills with a $25 monthly credit, and there is up to $700 available toward past due bills. Before, households earning up to 150% of the federal poverty level could qualify. Now, the program includes households at twice the poverty level. 77 out of 100 cities in the Great Lakes Water Authority service area have opted into this support, so check with your local municipality around eligibility. I'll put a link to waynemetro.org/wrap in the show notes in case you or someone you know could use it. And finally today, a fun one. Bucharest Grill has opened their 6th location and first in the suburbs. Located near Beaumont Hospital at Woodward and 13 Mile in Royal Oak, this location of the shawarma-slinging local chain is carry-out only. The insides look similar to all of their other locations, with a look into the kitchen while you wait, with their aim being a lot of value for the money. For me, it harkens a little bit back to their original location in downtown Detroit, which was a tiny counter connected to the Park Bar. Those memories are my favorite Bucharest memories, for sure. Thanks to Emily and John for joining us as members over at patreon.com/dailydetroit. It makes a huge difference, and we have a new program for organizations wanting to become members, and we have some interest in that already. You can learn more about it at dailydetroit.com/support or email me, jer@dailydetroit.com. Incoming attractions, as I said, Dr. Paul Thomas will stop by next, and we'll get a full update on the coronavirus pandemic locally. Fletcher Sharp will talk some sports. We'll tell you about what's happening over at Frame, a restaurant in Hazel Park, getting a ton of attention. Plus, what cool things the businesses in downtown Ferndale are up to help unbox the holidays and shop local. And we'll have a book giveaway that all of our members are eligible for at the end of the week. So lots of stuff going on. All right, we're really done. Thanks so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together.